We were signed up to do Spider-Man 3. At that point, it wasn't a movie title for us at all at that point. Then you see this Alex Ross, like black suited, with the red, without the webbing, and it was very iconic. And if we didn't get Toby, he was gonna be our Spider-Man. I think Kingpin was on the list, but Kingpin couldn't be used because of the Daredevil TV show that I think was getting ready to happen. I was a creative director and I loved that suit. I think if I didn't push for it, it wouldn't be in the game. And we left it all on the table, man. We tried to put it all in there as best we could.
Welcome back. On today's episode, we get the opportunity to talk to Chris Soares. Chris was the creative director on the 2002 Spider-Man game, which is basically like the dude in charge of everything. His other game credits include Draconis, Die by the Sword, Ultimate Spider-Man, and many more. Chris now spends his time as a freelance digital artist. Alright, let's get this party started. I'm here today with Christopher Soares. He was the creative director on the 2002 Spider-Man game. So thank you for taking the time out of your day to be here, Christopher.
I'm happy to be here, Darren. Thanks for having me on.
So if you want to just talk about and explain to people just briefly what a creative director is and what, day-to-day roles are involved in that.
Sure. Well, around the time of this game, when it came out, creative director as a role was just kind of emerging as a role in video games. Before then, you would have had producers, art directors, but the idea of a creative director wasn't something that was kind of widely done at that point. It was really emerging, unless you're like a Sid Meier or somebody like that. Creative directorness was kind of a new thing at that time. It's really standard now, and it's part of the game making practice, but it was relatively new, and I was Treyarch's studio art director at the time. And because of my kind of background and love of Spider-Man and everything that, my involvement with Spider-Man, they asked me to be the creative director for the project just because of the, talented, our talent pool at the top. I was probably the most versed in comic books, Spider-Man, and all of that. And I was already a lead of our art team. And so they asked me to fill that role and kind of work as a liaison between the movie folks and our art team, and then also game design. Nowadays, I think creative directors are much more of like the lead game designer person. And it's more of a game design, I don't know what word I'm looking for, like ethos, or it comes out of game design as opposed to like the art side of things. So that was a little unusual back then. But again, it was a new way of handling things. And I think that Treyarch just thought that I would have the most cohesive, full spectrum of like Spider-Man and, directing creative teams in the production of it. So I worked, we had a lead game designer and a game designer level builder teams that worked together on that side of things. And then I was there to help the scope of the whole project and make sure that it had the right feel and captured what they were doing in the movie and all of that. So my creative directorness really grows out of the side of like art directorness and the art side of things.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's definitely a great role to have. And then past projects that you've worked on just over the course of your career and even around Spider-Man was obviously the Spider-Man 2002. And then the notable ones that stuck out would have been Ultimate Spider-Man and the Minority Report game.
Yeah. So I started in video games back in 1991 at a company called Micropro Software. Was in Hunt Valley, Maryland. And I worked with, Sid Meier was there at the time, and I worked on the original Civilization and Pirates Gold. Darklands. I worked on a number of different games at Microprose before moving out to LA. And we're starting to work for game companies out there. I worked for Adrenaline Entertainment, and I did some 40K Warhammer stuff for them. I did a brief stint at Digital Domain, where they tried to develop their game division. That game that I worked on in the end didn't ever see the light of day and got canceled. They were working on 2 games at the same time, Barbie Fashion Designer for Mattel, and which made tons of money and did really well for Mattel. We worked on another game that didn't actually ship, and then at the end of my tenure there, I got hired on at Treyarch, and there was about 7 of us at Treyarch at that time. And they were struggling with a deal with a company called Interplay in trying to get their first game off the ground called Die by the Sword. And so I helped direct that game and do a majority of the graphics for that game. And that's how Treyarch got its start, was with a game called Die by the Sword. We continued to do stuff for them, and then started doing ports for Activision. And that'll get into the story of how Spiderman came from Neversoft and all of that stuff. But yeah, so my background was, like I said, I started in '91. Did a lot, did a stint at Microprose, and then eventually ended up at Treyarch. I ended up leaving Treyarch in 2008 to pursue some other opportunities, and have continued to work in games. Most recently, I worked at Cat Daddy working on WWE SuperCard, doing card art graphics for the wrestling game for mobile. So been doing games pretty steadily. I think of myself as retired from games now, because in January I decided to make a shift into illustration.
Oh.
But I worked in video games for about 30 years.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I'm just going to ask, well, what type of stuff are you doing now? So you said illustration. Are you working on any projects, whether it be personal projects that you'd want to promote or draw attention to, or any stuff over the last couple of years or anything?
Yeah, well, I only finished up in January working on WWE stuff, and so now I'm trying to develop a portfolio again for illustration as opposed to video games. And it takes a little time to develop that. I recently did an album cover for a melodic punk band here in Seattle. That'll be coming out in November. I just did that album cover. I'm just working on some new pieces. I'm excited with some of the new stuff. I would like to possibly do some comic book covers.
Nice.
And just working on doing some illustrations and some paintings and that kind of stuff nowadays.
Well, no, that's very cool. Before I started doing game and VFXy stuff, and when I was learning the texturing process, so the basic version of that, I was learning off coloring comic books, and I was going to go that route, just because I wanted to do that, and eventually led to the more VFXy stuff. But no, that's super cool. Yeah. So let's go. I know you've slightly touched on this already, but just jumping back, setting the scene. So back, 2000, 2001, that area. What was life like for you then? And how did you manage to get the job? Did you have to uproot your life and travel over to Santa Monica, or were you already working in that area, or just a bit of a time travel?
Yeah, I was living in LA at the time. As like I said, I worked at Digital Domain before moving to Treyarch, and Treyarch at that time, Treyarch started when we first started. We were in Venice, California. And just a little apartment, two-story condo where we would run the category, Cat 5 cable out the window for our network from the second floor down outside the house into the window of the bottom floor.
High tech.
With, again, just 7 or 8 of us making everything. We had, the 2 founding members of Treyarch, and then a small programming staff, and myself doing a lot of the art, and a producer helping with the art in those early days. I kind of lost track of where I was going with that one. So we weren't in Santa Monica yet when we got the job of doing Spider-Man. We were in El Segundo, California, which is kind of down by the airport, down by LAX. And Treyarch had continued to grow. And at a certain point, we were doing some work with Activision, doing mostly ports. And so Tony Hawk, Neversoft's
Awesome.
Tony Hawk game, awesome game. And we got to do the ports for that game. They would do the original PS1 title, and then we would do the ports to other things. And in that, we got to learn their game engine. Treyarch already had its own game engine. We had shipped games with. It was our own proprietary engine. But when Activision was asking us to port Neversoft stuff, we had to work with Neversoft's engine and just to, bring their games to other consoles. And it was kind of we were port house a little bit during that time. And so we were signed up to do Spider-Man 3 and basically ported over, or not ported, but to do the Spider-Man version of our own creation. After...
So when you say Spider-Man 3, do you mean the sequel to Enter Electro?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, just clarifying.
Yeah, I should have clarified. So, we were, at that point, it wasn't a movie title for us at all at that point. And we were going to be using Neversoft's engine because they had two really great, successful Spider-Man games, or one, and then the assumption was that the second one would do well at that time. And but they wanted to, as a company, focus on their Tony Hawk franchise and really pour their teams into that, making it the best thing it could be. And they felt like they were getting split creatively and trying to also handle the Spider-Man stuff. So in a big win for us at Treyarch, we got to work, start doing that what was going to be the third Spider-Man game after Enter Electro. We are busily trying to learn their engine. It's different than ours. They do things differently. Game mechanics, how you load the art in, everything would be, completely different and unique to Neversoft and their engine. So our teams are basically trying to learn it. And we're a few weeks in, and we're trying to come up with our own story. Like, we were going to be allowed to have whatever, within reason, whatever Marvel characters we wanted in our game, as far as like the bad guys go, for the most part. We couldn't have other, with some limited ability to maybe have some other cameos, but those would have to be special approval situation kind of stuff. So we started a story. It was kind of myself and the producer of the game's idea to kind of do sort of a Sinister 7, or what is it, Sinister 6, kind of game with all of the bad guys like coming into the city, so that we could have an excuse story-wise to have all of these bad guys that you would have to like fight throughout the game. That was kind of our idea for it, because we were working with another company's engine, trying to learn it and get used to it and its workings and how to make really great stuff with it. Also having this ability to make this our own unique Spider-Man game, third in the series, have whatever bad guys you want. So we started working on a story of, all these bad guys coming into the city, and we were maybe a month or so, 6 weeks into this process of developing our own sequel to Enter Electro. And that's when word came through from Activision that they had secured the license or the rights to do the movie game, and that our game was now becoming the movie game. And that beyond that, this game was going to be released with the movie, like pretty much day and date. Turned out to be like a week or so before or something like that. But essentially it was going to be a simultaneous release. And there was a lot of pressure to make sure it hit simultaneously. No delay in this game. It's not coming out 6 months after the movie. It's going to ship with the movie when it comes out 6 months from now. Well, 6 months isn't a terribly long time for making a video game. Even back then, that was a very rushed. That was more of like a port kind of schedule than a new IP thing, especially a big, flagpole tie-in like a Spider-Man movie game, right? So working with a really accelerated schedule, lots of pressure for a huge, big new movie coming out in 6 months with an engine that wasn't ours.
That's crazy.
Right. So that's kind of, and at this time we're in El Segundo. Right around this time, we're moving our whole shop to Santa Monica. We're moving into an office park in the same location where Activision is located, like basically a building away. And so as a company of around, I'm going to guess around 100 people at this point. I'm not exactly sure. Don't quote me on that part of it. But we were roughly we had grown from about 8 people up to roughly around 100 people. And we were moving from El Segundo, California to Santa Monica. Our Santa Monica offices where this game would finish, and also like ship a movie titled game tie-in 6 months with an engine that wasn't ours. So that this is going to, I'll point back to this comment when you ask some of your, some of the other questions that we get to about, why certain things happened. 6 months, not our engine. It's going to ship on this date. Get it done is really kind of like going to drive a lot of the conversation.
Yeah. That's it.
So that's kind of where it was at. Like, we were very excited to be getting Spider-Man. We had been doing some ports. Our own IP products had done okay enough to keep us getting work, but they hadn't really taken off huge at that point. As we moved into the Santa Monica office, our company started to split into different groupings, as opposed to like the entire company working on like one project at a time kind of thing. And that's when Minority Report was happening and starting to happen, and had more of a full cycle. So I know you commented earlier that I worked on Minority Report. I was given thanks from Treyarch because I was the studio art director. I didn't really work on other than like some technical help as far as using our game engine and things like that for the team. But I was focused on Spider-Man, and that was more of just a thanks for helping on Minority Report. Minority Report was happening while Spider-Man was happening in our studio at that time. We're starting to ramp up at the same time.
Yeah, so before we sink our teeth into the game itself, just a bit of background on yourself. Were you a big fan of Spider-Man before getting the job? Were you into the cartoons, into the comics, into the TV, the early, I think it was 70s TV show with Nicholas Hammond? Yeah.
I'm actually old enough to have watched the TV show on TV nice. When it aired. So, I've been a big comic book and Spider-Man fan since I was a kid. I think I started collecting Spider-Man comics when I was around 9 or 10 years old. My mom suggested that I should have a hobby. I decided I was going to start collecting comic books. I still remember the day of standing in the flea market holding a Captain America and a Spider-Man comic, trying to decide which was going to start my collection. And I went with Spidey just because I thought he looked cooler. I mean, it's just 9-year-old, right?
Yeah.
You're just going with what you like. I had an extensive comic book collection, Spidey collection. I had Spectacular Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man. From a really young age, I could tell the artist on the comic book covers and inside, like from their art style, and then sort of check the signature to go, oh yeah, that is Frank Miller, or that is John Byrne or whoever. And so in collecting those comics and liking art, I thought that I was going to draw comic books for a living. I wanted to go to art school and then move to New York City and hopefully work for Marvel and draw comic books. And as I got older, that was the 10-year-old me. As I got older and into art school, things shifted. I was more interested in doing graphic novels at that time, something a little bit more painterly and less formulaic than a Marvel comic. And so, that was when I was a kid growing up. I wanted to go to art school so that I could go and draw comic books. And when I finished up at art school and comics didn't take off like a rocket, but I got hired into video games, I kind of took this diversion, it's sort of comics adjacent. and the stability of having steady paycheck and insurance and all that stuff was welcomed as a just fresh art school graduate coming out into the world and thinking that they wanted to do comics. So I still have in my closet, I still have boxes and boxes of comics. I have I think issue 82 of Spider-Man's my earliest issue. I don't actively collect anymore, but that, and really for me, like my love and collecting of Spider-Man went through up until about Venom showing up.
Okay.
And then I sort of stopped for a while, like during those like mid to late 80s, because I was in art school and in college, and I kind of stopped collecting comics.
That's during Todd's.
And then Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man kind of brought me back into comics. It was like so fresh and new and sort of different at the time. And so it was, Todd McFarlane and that Amazing Spider-Man and his sort of revamped, stylization of Spidey kind of got me back into comics. And so working away in video games, and suddenly we have this opportunity to, hey, we're going to do a Spider-Man game. And, I'm the art director at the company. I'm like thrilled. And then it becomes beyond that. It's going to become a big movie game. And that was kind of exciting too. I mean, it was new ground, like how is the movie going to be compared to the comics and all that. So, but yeah, so in answer to your question, I watched the TV show. I collected the comics. I had the little action figures of Spider-Man, all that stuff. I had a good friend of mine. We used to take all of our comic books in their Mylar bags and tape them up to his wall and put them across the floor. So on a sleepover on a weekend, we'd have, a couple hundred comics laid out, and we would just critique covers and talk about storylines and all of that, kind of growing up. So yeah, pretty ingrained for me to get this opportunity to kind of to lead this project. Was also one of the hardest things to figure out is that suddenly when you're put in that position and in that chair, you find out very quickly that everybody and their brother has their exact idea of what Spider-Man is and how it should be and what the best Spidey is and the best Spidey stuff and what he's like and how it is. And it was just interesting to suddenly be sort of like challenged on like, here I was like getting sort of direct my hero in a way. And then, realizing like, whoa, like it's not just your property, Chris, like
it's everybody's.
Loves Spidey. And you have to kind of, you want to do the right thing and make it feel like a really great Spider-Man thing that, if you're a Spider-Man fan at heart, you'll love, that's what we kind of went for.
Yeah, no, that is definitely is awesome as a fan growing up, to be able to work on it. Because I know for like some TV shows, or like usually TV shows, you see like an actor on it, and if you like love the TV show, and then you see the actor, and it's like the actor, they didn't really know much about it before they got the job, and it's kind of like, but when you get one that's like a fan, you're like, yeah. Yeah, but
yeah, I mean, I felt like I was kind of carrying a torch, I felt really privileged and lucky to be sort of sitting in that chair. I it was palpable how many people would, love that opportunity, getting to sort of guide a Spider-Man game. So it wasn't lost on me. I love that aspect of it. It was just fortunate circumstances. I happened to be the art director at this company that through doing ports through Activision happened to land a Spider-Man game. And then I was kind of the guy because of my artistic background in the comics and all that stuff to kind of lead that up.
Yeah. So. No, that is awesome. So I guess get the teeth sunk into the game itself here. So the opening question was it going to be the sequel to Spider-Man Enter Electro, which you said that indeed it was. So whenever you got the game on the Neversoft engine, what way was that engine different from the one you were accustomed to using? Because I would have assumed, other than two different engines, and obviously engines back then I would assume they're light years different than engines nowadays. And did all of the So the Spider-Man 1 and 2 PS1, were all their movement mechanics and assets already currently existing on that engine by the time you got it to make the third game? Does that make sense? Oh.
Yes, it does. Yeah. So, yeah, their engine their Spider-Man engine evolved out of their Tony Hawk engine. It wasn't like they went and sort of created a whole, they kind of are starting with Tony Hawk and the mechanics of the jumping and the moving and all of that stuff, and then kind of turning that into into a Spider-Man game. When we were brought on to do it, we're given their Tony Hawk games, their Spider-Man games, their top crew came into our studio for some time, I don't want a week or something like that in the beginning, just for a hands-on, here's how you load things into our engine, here's how resources have to be packed. It was just a different process, as far as like exporting things out of a given art package and how you get that in, how the game graphics are set up and all of that. So, it was a learning curve. They wanted it to be successful. They wanted their title, Neversoft wanted their titles out there on these other platforms. And so they were very helpful, in giving us information and guidance and training on their engine and support I think as best they could, considering that they were making their own Tony Hawk game at the same time. So, we had to learn their engine. It was, quite a bit different, and it was, by the time we got it, it was pretty purposeful built in the sense that, a little bit like the cartoon, Spidey's webs go off, straight off the top of the screen. And, certain mechanics, because it came from, its guts and the, of it was from Tony Hawk. Like it was manipulated to kind of create a Spider-Man game out of it. And so all of the character animations, the polygon limits for like what the characters would be, all of that stuff was already sort of pre-dictated for us within the engine of like what it could handle, in the way that the game logic, the way you could set up, different mechanisms within the game, was already kind of there. And it was just a matter of kind of learning their process for developing stuff, and then trying to, get it going and get it working inside their engine. The idea was that, as we liked our own engine at Treyarch. We, Spider-Man 2, the movie game Spider-Man 2, the sequel to the game that we're talking about, was done with the Treyarch engine. It was only this one game that we did for Spider-Man in the Neversoft engine, was this first one. After that, when we were able to like have webs actually connecting to buildings and all of that stuff, we're back now over in Treyarch's engine, feeling like, okay, we're back home. We know that our own stuff, and we can develop within it, and we just liked our own engine better. I mean, that's not a unique thing. Like any game company that has kind of their own engine has probably a lot of pride in it, and familiarity, right? Like you really want to be able to kick it out and make some really awesome stuff. And so when you feel like your game engine, how to push that to its limits. Where if you're learning someone else's engine, you're kind of just trying to glean the engine and hopefully it doesn't crash and this will work kind of approach. So that's really where it was at. So yeah, we had all of the resources from Spider-Man 1 and 2. We had the code. We could load things in. We had training from Neversoft. But yeah, and then as we talked about, it sort of evolved into this movie title very shortly thereafter.
Yeah. So whenever, because I think that I might get the date wrong, but the PlayStation 2 would have been released maybe a year or two before that. Whenever yous were assigned to make Spider-Man 3, was it for the PlayStation 2?
I believe so. The thing is, I made games my first game shipped on 7 floppy disks for PC. And so I was a PC video game artist for the longest time. And then eventually I shifted into consoles, and I did, PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, Sega Saturn, PlayStation 3. And so, and all of the various different Xboxes. So for me, it gets a little bit muddled, because again, we were doing ports, and we also our Treyarch's engine was designed to be able to export out and create for all of the various main platforms. So the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, and the Xbox. And so we could export and deliver on those 3 platforms pretty much simultaneously, which was one of Treyarch's biggest pluses for being sort of a port house and getting these opportunities or whatever. We weren't a port house, but I mean, we had the ability to create games and get them out on these various different consoles. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. And so since the game and the film was released at the same time, more or less, and they were both in development at the same time. So while you were making the game, the film was being made in some capacity, whether it be the shooting or the post. Did anything from the game have to get changed because something in the film got changed, like late in the development? So yeah, that's pretty. Did anything get changed like later in development?
Oh, that's all right. I mean, I think I have a good story about that one actually. So like I said earlier, we were developing our own storyline for a unique original Spider-Man game. When it became the movie game, a lot of stuff shifted automatically. We knew that we wanted to match the look of the movie, and upon hearing that we were going to be doing it, we hadn't even seen the costume yet. The costume with the raised webbing and all of that hasn't been released. There's no promo pictures yet or any of that stuff. But we're excited, like, oh, Sam Raimi is going to be doing the Spider-Man movie, and it's going to be a big, huge blockbuster movie, and we're going to want to tie into it. Here's the lead actors. So at that point, we've got, we know who it's going to be, Toby and Kirsten Dunst and Willem Dafoe. And so we know that we want to tie into the movie as much as we can. Like we're going to be the movie release. And so we have an added thing of not just kind of creating a Spider-Man game that we think would be a cool comic book Spider-Man game, but trying to be the movie adaptation of the Spider-Man game. And so as far as things changing, if we were going to have Green Goblin in the game before, well, now we're going to have this new Green Goblin with those a more militaristic, like with all of the hard suit. Look into the stuff, and we were going to embrace that, like whatever the look of this Spider-Man was going to be in this movie, and whatever Green Goblin was going to look like, that's what they were going to look like in our game. Done, flat. That's what it's going to be. It's going to look like them. It's Mary Jane isn't going to look like Remetta's Mary Jane from back in the day. It's going to look like Kirsten Dunst in this movie is what Mary Jane is going to look like for our game. And so we kind of understood that. And then right around that time, we started to get a few images from the movie early. We got an early release image of Spidey that was going to become a promo release and get used within a few days or weeks after we were handed it all around. But that was our first time seeing like the raised webbing on him and seeing what, the shape of the eyes and just what the suit was going to look like. And then seeing Green Goblin. Our game designers, obviously, they want a whole arsenal of things for a bad guy to throw at you. So, like, what are the Goblin bombs going to be in the movie? And how are they, what do they do? And does he have any other, like, special, abilities or gadgets or whatever? We'd want to, try to have all of those things. And so we did. Our design sheets and our character turnarounds and all of that stuff started to just follow what the movie was doing. And then we were late in the game, as you alluded to, in that most of the principal shooting had been done, but they were still wrapping up still doing some principal photography as we came on board, and there was tons of effect stuff to still go and all of that. So we were given the script at that point, and then on movie sets, they shoot still photography, at least nowadays, especially on bigger, blockbuster movies. They're going to shoot 35 still, right alongside with the movie stuff. And so that can go to marketing, that can go to wardrobe, that can go to all of the various different, places that those shots need to go out to, including nowadays the game. And
sorry,
so we would
don't mean to interrupt, just the monitors just popped off there.
Yeah.
Behind you. Oh, yeah.
Oh, oops. All right, thanks. Nice catch.
Yeah.
Sorry. Been talking a lot.
Just keeping it nice and pretty.
Yeah, that's good. So where was I at this? So with the movie, we started getting pretty regular dumps of stuff, and so we would get folders sent over from Santa Monica because we were, they were just basically down the road from us. But we would get stuff shot, the stuff that was shot on the green screen, or when the stuff like the veranda is going to collapse into the street below, and we would see like that with the green stuff set up behind it. We would get all of those stills, and so we were seeing the movie without sort of hearing and seeing the movie. So we were, if that makes any sense, like we weren't seeing so much video and things weren't like cut together for us to see, but we were seeing tons of stills and having the script and sort of, basing our characters off of, all of that stuff that we would see. We did, one of the first things I did was ask for some of the Spider-Man costume to be sent over to us so that we could actually see the material. I asked for a swatch of material, and some of my effects, or my digital artists were like, swatch of material, like what are you talking about? And the whole idea of like connecting with a movie was kind of new, right, to video games. It hadn't happened a ton by this point. And sure enough, they were happy to send it over. We got sent swatches of Green Goblin stuff, the Spidey material with the little hexes on it, and then with the raised webbing, little piece of that so we could see it and try to make it, make our characters correct. So having that connectivity really helped a lot. We were on set a couple of times. So we were on set during the big battle at the end for the in the church where Green Goblin, his glider like impales him or whatever. We were on set that day in a big, open set, and got to see all that happen. And then on some other occasions, we got to see some early edits of scenes, not like the whole movie or anything like that. But we were, we got to go into Sony and sit down with John Dykstra and talk about Green Goblin effects. And so here's one of my heroes from Star Wars franchise talking to me about, Spider-Man stuff. And then he mentions, yeah, we tried using the trident today, and our eyes lit up like, trident? He has we're working out. We're not sure. It might be in, it could be cut. We're not even sure. And all of, game design and us just like lit up like, hey, new weapons, other cool stuff no one has talked to us about yet. And now John Dykstra just said, a trident. So we got really excited, about Green Goblin having a trident. I don't think it actually even made it into the final game. I don't recall actually. But it was just that, that kind of connectivity and getting to see the actors and getting shots from all that, the getting the suit material and all that, and just doing our best to kind of make this Spider-Man game, keeping in mind like new engine, 6 months, trying to capture all of this stuff. We also, like, I guess we'll get into it when we talk about VO and voice actors and the actors and that stuff. But I had more connectivity for Bond than Spider-Man by a little bit. I think at that point we had, there was more accepting of video games to be more entrenched with the movie development. And so we actually had more connectivity inside the Bond games. I think with Spider-Man, it was just that by the time the deal got done, the movie was well into production and it was almost heading into post. And it was just that kind of timing. They were great as far as like what they gave us to use and to try to, connect it to the movie. We had this thing of like, a strong sense of what the Spider-Man history was. And then this new origin movie kind of coming out, and what is Aunt May going to look like? What does Uncle Ben look like? And this, just telling these stories, Oscorp and all of that, like how was the movie going to like incorporate it? We were very familiar with what the comic looked like, and even a sense of like with the cartoons and Spidey's quips and being very like kind of punchy and fun. Sorry, I think I'm getting
Spidey's.
Getting go ahead.
Spidey's quips in the 2002 game, like they're generally like genuinely hilarious. Like I I can't remember off the top of my head, but whenever I had to run through the game again, and because Toby's Spider-Man is a lot quieter, like Toby is the kind of the quiet comedy, but even though that is carried through the game, obviously because of the gameplay, you need more quips. I genuinely just thought they were hilarious. The one that sticks out is the Goblin battle where you chase Goblin and he like breaks stuff throughout the city and you have to fix it. And then he's like, "Oh, no, none of these people that you're trying to none of these people that you're trying to help would ever help you." And he's like, "Well, considering they can't lift like 200 pounds of steel, I can't really blame them." And it's just like that throughout the game.
We had a great writer working with us at Treyarch to help like write that stuff. Well, what was interesting for us is we thought of Spidey as being kind of more tongue in cheek or more kind of slapsticky, kind of more comedy. And Sam Raimi's Spider-Man was not. I'm trying to find the words here. Like I don't want to say like it wasn't that it was deadpan. It was just kind of played more straight.
It was played down, yeah.
Yeah, played more kind of
still
real as opposed to like quirky comic book or cartoony. I almost say comic book as a bad regard, but just in the sense of something where I think in our minds we had something a little bit more kid-like and a little bit more like just fun and quippy as opposed to teenage angst strife movie. That was kind of like Toby's approach on it. So anyway, that was an interesting take that took some reconciling of like, you know, what we thought that how the tone of the game would be in the movie and what it actually turned out to be was quite a bit different in the audio, like in the performance of the actors and that stuff.
Yeah. So excluding like Scorpion Vulture and all those people, the main story in the game differs quite a bit from the story in the movie. Well, I'll just give you some examples. So, like the main plot, or the spark of the Goblin plot, is that Norman in the game. The spark of the Goblin plot in the game is that Norman is trying to, you know, he sees Spider-Man. It's like, oh, we want his powers for our super soldier serum. And then that leads to he gets Peter's blood and then he becomes the Goblin. Then there's the later in the game where Peter infiltrates Oscorp and then he figures out that Norman's going after MJ. And then the final battle in the game is on the bridge as opposed to the church in the movie. So what was the reason behind those changes? Or was it like probably down to you just didn't have that information when making it, so you just had to take a guess? Or obviously you would have wanted a bit of creative like freedom of differentiating from the movie with the other villains, but for those like main points, just what was the thought process or reasoning behind them?
Yeah, I mean, it was really a combination of those things, of it not being completely done, a finished movie at that point. Probably the set locations that we had for our game to make a big impactful thing. I mean, it's just trying to, again, balance this, you know, engine that we had access to and the movie and our understanding of it. But then also like, you know, the movie story is a kind of a different thing, right? It's more about this development of Norman Osborn's story with, you know, the serum and becoming Green Goblin. It's also like, you know, Spidey's origin story. And, you know, we want and so we're sitting here with the Neversoft engine that's all designed for big baddies, like to fight you up in a level. So it was trying to be sort of story accurate, adjacent to the movie, but focus on having a good game. Like I think sometimes movie games will struggle with, they were just exactly the movie, and a movie and a game kind of have they're different goals. You know, they can be sort of stand side by side, but they kind of have different, they're not both trying to do the same thing. And so for us to create an exciting game that would be fulfilling and fun to play, we needed those layers, and we needed, you know, some different story elements to give you missions and reasons, you know, to try to connect our own sort of story that we have for Spidey and all these other villains coming in, adjuncted onto this movie that, you know, we're trying to replicate. and have it sort of woven together so that you can have a more complete game with a variety of bad guys with, fun levels to figure out and to fight and to play through. And so, trying to be accurate to the movie is kind of one thing, but to the storyline, it gets a little too, again, separate things. I think it would have made for kind of more of a boring game. Like, we needed some room and some reasons to take you in some other places and give you a fun, fulfilling, game experience that felt totally rooted in Spidey's world, but the sort of movie Spidey world. And, we're trying to take some cues because we haven't actually seen the movie yet of maybe if Vulture's going to be in this new world, or Scorpion, or any of these other ones, what how would they look? How would they be? And so it was really just trying to give you more game, give players a denser, richer, bigger game than just the movie story, which was the origin story, fighting a wrestler. It's okay. It's a good early move, but it doesn't, you want your Green Goblins, you want big supervillains to fight against. So it was just came from a place of trying to, giving you more, trying to give players more in the game. And
yeah, I just even just go specifically, just the location of the final battle. What was the decision to make it on that bridge? And even Norman's final line was "Tell Harry I'm sorry," as opposed to the film's one. Was that just a case of you had to make a call? You didn't know what the film was, and you're like, well, make the. Does that make sense?
I think that we just kind of understood, the way we understood the script, and having not seen all the stuff that we. Yeah. I honestly, I don't remember. This is the real answer.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair.
I think most of it was just that, the bridge looked really cool. We knew it was part of the final fight, and that's where we could kind of set things up. I don't recall if maybe the church location was one too many locations for us to do, and it had to get cut. I don't actually recall at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's.
We're just trying. Again, it was just trying to use the Goblin glider, a big location. We invested a lot of time trying to make a really great environment for that final fight. So it wasn't exactly what the movie was. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's still awesome. And then what was the reasoning behind having the Green Goblin as a playable character? Because it was completely badass, but I think it is objectively it seemed like a decent bit of extra work to pile on. What was the reason behind making it playable? Because games don't do that.
Yeah. We it wasn't planned from the beginning, but what we did understand was to work with Neversoft's engine at that time. It had, I think, one male skeleton and maybe one female skeleton, but maybe it might have only just been one skeleton. That's how limited it was, and the numbers of bones that particular skeletal rig, inside the character. Was exactly one size. And that was just a limitation at the time for this, Tony Hawk game. It grew out of all the skaters are roughly the same size. You don't have Juggernaut or someone that's huge, that you have to make with a crazy different skeleton, or Scorpion with a tail skeleton running off the back of it to animate the tail. And so you have one skeleton, and all of the characters are going to be, posed on this one character. So any animation works on any character. Any character can be any character. So we can test the game with Mary Jane web slinging her way through the city by just loading her up, which character you want to load, because they just will play all of the various different animations. So that just came through serendipity of, using Neversoft's engine. It had that ability to do that. Spidey and Goblin, for the most part, were the same exact skeleton with just a different skin sitting on it. And so that's what made it really easy in that sense. I mean, you still have to do game design things. And if you want to do a whole playthrough as Goblin, now you're signing yourself up as game designers to, you've been given a free Goblin to use with all free animations. Awesome. But you don't really have this whole other side of a game that you could do with it unless you spend some time and put some energy into that. And so, that got you could play any character in this game. We kind of got bit in the butt for this because you could play as Mary Jane. And so one of the things was you could play through the whole game as Mary Jane, get to the big ending scene at the end of the bridge, and then, Spidey kisses Mary Jane. But if you're playing as Mary Jane kisses Mary Jane, and all the hoopla around all of that, when it was really just, oh, look, they're the same skeletons. We can have some fun by like load up a different character. You want to play as a different suited Spidey? We would have loved to have had like a whole ton of Spidey suits, like all of the various different like Spideys throughout the years would have been great. We didn't have time for it all. But yeah, we had the ability to switch it around. I think the game designers were just like, we need to do something with this, because again, we're trying to make the most out of a product with 6 months. You can't you're not going to reinvent their game engine underneath so much. You just want to you're just trying to make sure you can take advantage of everything that's there and use it to the best of your abilities. And so we had the ability to load up different characters. We thought it was fun. If it's fun, do it. We just, I don't know. We could, and so we did.
Yeah,
and like you said, more games should do that or have that ability. It would be really fun. I mean, as games evolved and character skeletons and characters got way more elaborate and specific. It doesn't allow for that kind of cookie cutter, hot swappable kind of. There's something about PS2 graphics and the number of polys that you can have. You could get away with some of that stuff back then. I don't think you really could today. I mean, certainly there's like switching of skins and that kind of stuff, but things are so much higher polygon counts. The whole textures and materials is a whole thing. It's not. It was just an offshoot of the time and like what engines could kind of do. Sort of like limitations, but then kind of playing with those limitations. So yeah, it came from that. The team didn't set out with any kind of agenda to have Mary Jane kiss Mary Jane at the end. It was just we didn't. I don't think we even thought about it. Like, I don't think our play testers even caught that as a bug because playing as other skins wasn't considered like a main level like kind of bug for us in that game. But yeah, it
definitely would have been annoying. Just at the end, it's like, oh, they kiss. I was like, we have an entire game that you could say things about. That like laser focus on that one like silly thing. It's just like, oh.
Hey, gamers.
Yeah, true. So was Metal Gear Solid an inspiration for any parts of the game? I say this namely because you had a lot of stealth mechanics in the game. There was the VR training modes, and then the final boss in the Oscorp sections is Oscorp's ultimate weapon, which kind of is like a giant Metal Gear of sorts.
Yeah. I think Metal Gear influenced us probably as much as any developer at that time making a video game. I mean, there was a while there where, I've been in games so long that we would be working on a game and everyone would compare everything to Doom. Is it like Doom? Or, we should do that thing like they do in Doom. And so Doom was a huge influence, and then Metal Gear Solid, which was a huge influence. But it wasn't like we set out like, oh, we should just do the Metal Gear thing. I don't know if I think that Neversoft in their engine, and I'm fuzzy on this, so I could be wrong. I think they had something in there for like a big character, and we wanted to try to like take advantage of that. The idea for the vultures, little spider hunters, the little mechanical spiders was my idea, but then I think it evolved eventually to kind of like we'll have the big daddy one of that, inside Oscorp. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of lost my train of thought there, where I was going with that.
Well, what was the I guess just the inspiration for the the Big Daddy Spider for Oscorp's ultimate weapon, or was it just we want something big that shoots lots of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like trying to make it feel like a big boss, and how can we I think they had that working from Inter Electro. I'm trying to remember. I don't exactly remember why we had the big boss, but I think it had something to do with that, and then. having Oscorp, we could kind of, play with what we thought Oscorp would be, because they only showed a very limited amount in the movie, and we wanted to kind of make it more, like for gameplay reasons. And fighting a big boss at the end would just be something kind of unique and would keep it Oz. It's not having to dip into Marvel stuff and saying, "Hey, we want to change your stuff." It's like, well, we came up with a game thing that fits in that world, and they were okay with it, kind of thing. So
Yeah, that was awesome.
I don't know. I
And
don't have
then
the best answer there for you. Sorry.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's fine. Like even if you say like even if it's as simple as it was a while ago, don't remember. Like that's cool.
Yeah.
But just it is what it is. It's the exploring the time capsule of
Sure,
stuff.
sure.
But what was the reasoning behind Scorpion's suit? So obviously in like the comics, he was pure green. And in the game, similar to the PS1 ones, he was the green and purple suit. What was the reason behind that? And was it? I think the reason for the PS1 was the low polys, and the green just looked like a blob. Or was it already just in the engine?
Yeah, I think they were trying to make him cooler. Honestly, I love the old original comics and the original Scorpion in the green all green suit, but it's a little cheesy compared to like what you're trying to do with this badass Green Goblin throwing these goblin grenades that are look very high tech, right? And so if this is the world that you're creating, you kind of want the other bad guys to be of the same ilk without like fully going on into like an ultimate sort of redesign of the world. So I think it was really just trying to make Scorpion, again, as probably a carryover of what they had from Inter Electro. But then again, for the same reasons you mentioned, like, a blob of green on the screen just, isn't going to read as well as having the segmented up suit and being able to see those, various different parts and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And then it says online, or I've read online, that Josh Keaton, sorry, I'll rephrase that. Yeah. So Josh Keaton voiced Harry Osborn and did Harry's lines. And then I read online that Josh Keaton was originally set to do the voice of Spider-Man, presumably during the Spider-Man 3 period. Is that true, or is that some internet craziness?
It's kind of true. So when we were given the movie license to work on, when the Spider-Man game was becoming a movie license, we weren't sure which actors we'd have access to, which actors we'd be able to schedule time with, actors that we'd be able to afford, which ones would we be able to get, which ones wouldn't we be able to get. And these kind of negotiations were kind of ongoing throughout the course of our development. And because we had the release date in mind already, that was clicking ever closer, and we're not sure if we're going to be able to get any of the mainline talent, we covered our bases. So we did a pretty extensive casting, as far as trying lots of different actors to play the different parts. And because we had our game script already written, because we needed to have it written for creating the game and getting things nailed down, we kind of knew what the game script was going to be. And again, at this time, I want to reiterate that we didn't really have an understanding. We hadn't heard any of Toby's performance yet. So we're thinking this very like cartoon, quippy kind of not gimmicky, but kind of cartoony Spidey, quippy and like that, and not the sort of more deadpan, serious, Toby Spidey that we eventually got. So it was written that way with the quippiness, and he was able to do that style of reading. But we had the script already done. Being unsure, we had him, and we thought he was so good, we had him record both parts for Spidey and for Harry, because we weren't sure. And if we didn't get Toby, he was going to be our Spider-Man, and we would have had someone else record the Harry lines. And then in the end, we got Tobey Maguire in sort of, I want to say, the last minutes. And so we shifted him over to play Harry's. We used his Harry takes basically from the recording session to become Harry for us. Yeah, he did a great job. His personality really comes through when he acts, like, for his voice recording and that stuff. And he was just great to work with. And so we wanted to have a complete game, and we recorded him doing all of that stuff. And then eventually we were able to record Tobey Maguire and Willem Dafoe, but we never got Kirsten Dunst. And so that's why Kirsten isn't. She's not in the game, because we weren't able to do it. The only two actors from the movie that signed on were the two main leads, and so everyone else was people where we did casting calls. We worked with SAG actors, and found roles for all of this, and then we. It was all recorded in Wood Holly over in Hollywood. It was a recording studio that did a lot of VO work for like Saturday morning cartoons and like Powerpuff Girls. And anyway, so we did all of the recording over there for all of our actors, including Tobey Maguire and Willem Dafoe. And when we got Tobey, it was more correct, and it was different because we wrote for a different voice in mind, because we didn't know at the point of what happened. So when Tobey came in and he read the lines, he read them, or acted them, played them, and in the way that he did in the movie. And that's when it was kind of a revelation for us in that moment to kind of understand. Oh wow, it's a lot more serious and kind of deadpan. And I keep saying deadpan. It's not really the right term. It just wasn't so kind of goofy, quippy.
Yeah.
And playing it a little bit more straight. And that was just his approach. Anyway, it was a great experience to be able to record actors like Willem Dafoe. Were you see him go through the script and.
Were you in the studio with him while he was recording, giving direction?
Yeah. Or? So as the creative director, I was there for the recording of pretty much all of the actors and would give direction for all of the actors. So yeah, I did Willem Dafoe and Tobey Maguire, but all of the actors, like for the whole project, I would sort of help direct them. So it would be me, our producer, and the writer sitting in the sound booth, or in the recording booth, and then the actors would be on the other side, doing their stuff.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. One thing I really do want to ask about, just diving back to, or like sparking back off to whenever you said that you got the pieces of the Goblin suit and the Tobey suit. Mm-hmm. Just to digress, as a fan, that would have been amazing to come into work and be like, oh yeah, here's a piece of the Goblin armor and Spider-Man suit. But yeah, so just kind of stemming off that, what was the reason for including the Alex Ross suit and the Alex Ross Goblin suit? It's awesome, but what was the reason behind that? Because I believe, well, from what I've read online, the Alex Ross was the prototype to the Tobey suit, or else it was an alternate choice. But yeah, just what was your experience on that? Yeah,
so my recollection of this was right at the time when we found out that we were going to be doing a movie license, or this movie. It was going to turn into the Spider-Man the movie game as opposed to just doing a Spider-Man game. I don't know if it was leaked online or whether it was just released because it wasn't going to get used. But we saw those images, and I'm a huge Alex Ross fan, being an illustrator, and I really love his work. And so I was already kind of like aware of him, and then seeing that stuff showed up online before we were given it from Sony. And we saw that, and I loved it at the time. So there's this moment where you think you're going to get to do a Spider-Man game. You haven't seen what the movie Spider-Man is going to look like yet, but then you see this Alex Ross, like black suited, with the red, without the webbing, and it was very iconic. And I got really excited, like, oh, that's going to be really cool. And so we kind of started to even work up those ideas. And then within a day or two, not long, we saw what the real suit was going to look like, with the raised webbing and all of that. And it was cool and interesting. It was a little bit at the time like, wow, raised webbing on a suit, that seems a little weird and different. And and it had this sort of like silvery kind of edge quality to the raised webbing. It was just, so I was a fan of his stuff. And then what happened was that Alex Ross's work, I think, was done for the movie. And but then, like you said, they didn't go that direction. And so it was given us to use as just part of the material because, like I said, they gave us a ton of like photography and support through the making of it, including. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just going to ask.
I was just going to say, including giving us those images from the Alex Ross that people were seeing online, and because we had these different skins that we could play, we thought, I was a creative director and I loved that suit. I think if I didn't push for it, it wouldn't be in the game. But I had hoped that was going to be the Spider-Man costume. I liked it so much, and so we found a way when we had these other skins, to have, I don't remember if we had like a classic comic book skin that you could play in that game. But I know that we could load up like other Spidey, suits. And so we were, that was just an extra one that we were able to tie in at the end because I think we had to get special permission to include it, but because it was given to us as part of the stuff, we were allowed to. So we
did you get the Alex Ross stuff? Was it just like reference photos or was it like the physical stuff so you could see materials?
Oh no, it was just his renderings. Just basic color printouts of his renderings.
Yeah.
And I mean, he renders pretty realistically, right? So you can kind of tell when something is sort of satin or whether something is leather or spandex. You can kind of, in his painting style, you can kind of glean that stuff. Yeah. So we just tried to, capture that as well.
I know in the final game, the Alex Ross Goblin suit. I mean, I think it looks legitimately badass. Like a lot more into the horror-esque element. Like legitimately badass.
I would be lying if I said the team loved that stuff when it came through, and we might have been a skitch disappointed when it didn't go that direction. With the hard suited Goblin mask was kind of a lot to take in at the time.
It was
in that moment. It felt.
It was one of the critiques of the film. If I recall, people didn't like that it was. Well, that it was a hard mask. Obviously now it's loved and Willem Dafoe is loved, but
sure.
Back then, people wanted the movable mouth, and I think you can see stuff online of the prototype. I don't know if it's the Alex stuff or if it's just the prototype of the much more the Goblin mask that moves. It looks a lot more horror. Yeah,
I mean they went through a process of trying to figure out what their Goblin was going to be. To me, it felt a little too much like Power Rangers kind of thing, and having an actor having to try to act through that kind of suit was tough. It's like Judge Dredd, right, with Sylvester Stallone throughout the movie. He barely wears the helmet, but come on. It's like it doesn't even feel like Judge Dredd when you're not wearing the helmet.
Yeah, no, Willem definitely it's Willem's use of his voice. It's like whenever people yourself when listening to people talk, generally it's a lot flatter, but Willem's background in theater and how he uses the words, it really, 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 it conveys so well. Obviously in No Way Home, where it's just we're just using your face because it's awesome. But even with the mask on, Willem's just badass. But with the mask on, Willem still did a phenomenal job of conveying the sinisterness of the Goblin. So another thing that's in the game that was so random was a UFO in the level Razor's Edge. What was the reason for having that in? And I mean, it's possible somebody threw it in and or you don't remember. But yeah, so what was the reason for that being in there, if you recall?
I don't remember.
Don't remember? Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's one of those.
I mean, I think it came from a place, we had a number of different game designers that worked on this, trying to create fun and interesting levels, key being fun and trying to figure out, you've got this story that you're having to work around, game design wise, and you're wanting it to fill out and feel like as much of a big open city as it can be, even though it really isn't at that stage in our development. And so just trying to fill it out, you just had to have all these try to have side quests, try to have fun little Easter eggs in there for people to find. I think it really just was that, like, having a bit of fun and
Yeah, no, there's
not
like,
taking it all too seriously. Like, you
Yeah.
want to have some fun things in those levels, and
yeah, no, it's like some of the like behind the
something to
scenes.
make you laugh, and
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
like some of the some like behind the scenes of development stuff. Like they've said, like the creative directors are the dude in charge. Just like send like a notebook or Word document to people, and it's like, just tell us what Easter eggs you put in there. It's like, we're not going to get bad. We just want a heads up that it exists, because like an artist might throw in something.
Yeah, I mean, we hit. I have some other ones that I remember more from Ultimate Spider-Man. Some Easter eggs that we put in there intentionally. We were a fairly tight knit group. I don't. We wouldn't have. If there was time for it and some kind of fun Easter egg could get put in, we would have been all for it. It wasn't like it had to get snuck in past the creative director or anything like that. It was, provided the game is, going to ship on time and capture that feeling of the movie was my biggest thing. And wanting it to be a fun game, like knowing that in its core, we have the Neversoft's engine underneath us, which is already, proven to be a fun mechanic. And if, you can use that, and if you don't mess it up, it'll be a fun game. So it's just probably game designers fooling around in a moment, trying to have some fun, add some life to a level.
Yeah.
But again, I don't. I'm
Simple
sorry, I
as-
don't have like. I remember the afternoon. It was the funniest thing. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
It really is just an Easter egg.
And then just stemming off like the secrets and stuff. So like
Yeah.
the secrets. Well, yeah, the secrets in the game are used to generate a currency. So if you don't use cheats, you get the currency, and then you can buy all the costumes, all the cheats and stuff. So in the first level, the secret is the woman lost her handbag. It's like one of the random rooftops you get over to. She's like, "Oh, I've lost my handbag." It's like, "Where is it?" It's on a different rooftop. It's like, "Are you doing a tour of rooftops?" Yeah. So it starts off with like a side quest type thing, but then the later just become like you have to pull a switch. They're like optional rooms or things that are slightly out of the way. It's like, were they originally, because in my opinion, it seems like they were originally meant to be, optional side quests and doing stuff, but it seems like time restrictions. Perhaps it's like, right, we need to cut some of the stuff out. We don't have time. So was that the case?
Yeah, I think there was a moment where like we realized, like, if you spend a whole lot of time creating side quests over here in the corners that people aren't really going to see, or a bulk of people aren't going to see, you're not spending that time on like a main through of the game and that experience. So I think it was a combination of trying to make sure that you would see some of these side things and kind of force the issue a little bit. But then also, in the beginning with that first handbag, I mean, I think if I recall right, it was really more of just a training thing. So you probably didn't happen upon her. It probably felt like you happened upon her, but it got launched because we triggered something to teach you that mechanic so that you would learn that you could get those other skins and start to understand the currency and the play of the game to get that other stuff. You got to teach those mechanics to the players so that they get it and want to try to get those other skins, those other costumes and things like that. So, it was mostly that, like, this combination of trying to make it feel open world, trying to make it feel like Spidey's just out patrolling. So it's not like he's always only fighting supervillains. Like he's a do-gooder and is going to, be out there patrolling and doing stuff. And what some of those events are going to be like, and just to try to set them up and then interweave that with the big supervillains. It's really just to help fill out the world and make it feel as full as it can. In some of those places, it'll start to show some of the weakness or some of the, you only had 6 months to develop it. Working with someone else's engine, like, some of the cracks may start to show there in some of the side quests and things like that. But it's there for a reason, to show mechanics and then to also give, like, flush out the world and try to make it feel full. I think we got, as a company, Treyarch got better at that, later on, as an open environment, open world became a bigger thing and a more part of what we were doing. It became a more ingrained thing. I think this is us like learning how to do that a little bit. So.
No, even just the 6-month deadline alone is, I mean, I think that's just mentally fast. And then throw in that you had to go onto a different engine, so everything you knew how to do, it's like takes like 5 times longer. You're like, where does that go? It's like if I went to like,
why didn't it even load? I thought, why isn't it loading? How come I can't? The character's not showing up? Like these kinds of questions. As you're in production trying to make this thing.
With the deadline creeping closer, it's like, I could get this done so much quicker.
Exactly.
So were there any, I guess sticking with regarding the 2002 game, strictly, was there any scrapped ideas, levels or mechanics that didn't make it into the game?
I mean, not specifically. We already were looking at trying to have the webs not go off the top of the screen. Just as like a very like kind of cartoony kind of hand waving of just, it's Spidey, the webs just kind of go off into space, he's swinging, it's attached somewhere, allowing for that forgiveness or whatever. We were attempting to try to get real swinging, but we couldn't get it done inside, our programmers and stuff couldn't get it done inside the Neversoft engine. It just, the logic wasn't there or whatever. Like it wasn't there. The ability to do it was too hard in the amount of time that we had. But so, we did experiment with trying to have that. I think we got it in Spiderman 2, where you have actual like web points off of the building and better. The whole swinging mechanism in Spiderman 2 is really what we wanted for Spiderman 1. We just couldn't, didn't have the time to develop it and put it in there. As far as specific, I'm trying to remember again, forgive me, 23 years ago. I'm trying to remember specific mechanics or things that didn't make it in. I mean, not too much. It just felt kind of like a Herculean effort to like kind of pull that off in that amount of time frame. I don't know. I'm sure things got cut because things get cut all the time, and we would do, concept sketches for things, or, there may have been other Oscorp elements that I'm not remembering right now. If we could, we'd try to pour it into the game. I mean, it's not going to do, if it's crap, then leave it on the side. But if it's good, we want to do our best to kind of get it into the game any way that we could. So then the movie didn't push back as far as like Sony and the licensing. I don't recall too much of like they were pretty on board and pretty happy with what we created. I don't remember a lot of like pushback or things that we had to change. We got Toby and Willem late in the game, as far as like, pardon the pun, as far as getting their recordings done and getting them in. But yeah, it was pretty, I'm sure there were things that smaller things that I'm forgetting, but there wasn't like these, there was this great level and we just couldn't kind of find like the right hook for it. So it's sitting out there somewhere. There wasn't, you got to play everybody in the game as far as like different skins. So there was, if we could make it work as far as you playing other characters, we would totally try to get that in there, as we did. So yeah, I'm sure things were cut, along the way to make it a game and make some decisions to, have it arrive on time, looking as good as it could, but and as fun as it could be to play. No. But I'm sorry, I don't have that super secret thing. Like, I've lived with 23 years of guilt because it didn't make it in. We left it all on the table, man. We tried to put it all in there as best we could. And I don't have like specifics of something that didn't quite make it in.
No, it's cool.
I wish I had a better story. The only thing would be that Trident, and I don't actually honestly remember whether it made it into the game or not. I remember at the time it being a huge win for us because we wanted lots of Goblin things, that we could have layers of badness or weaponry and different stuff that he could do in different levels. And so having one more thing like the Trident would have been really great for us.
And then regarding the licensing of the characters, so you had, was it Vulture, Shocker, Scorpion, and then Kraven. What I guess what was the process to get them in? Because I know that whenever Sony got the licensing to Spider-Man, there were like because something to do with the licensing between Sony and Marvel that some villains were either couldn't be used. Like what was the process getting those characters?
Yeah. So we had, like I said in the beginning, we had a story of kind of the Sinister Six kind of coming into town kind of idea. And so wanting to have like all of the classic Spidey bad guys if we could. I don't recall. I think we were going to have Kingpin, or I think Kingpin was on the list, but Kingpin couldn't be used because of the Daredevil TV show that I think was getting ready to happen or had happened or was going to have Kingpin. So yeah, all I remember is that we had these list of characters that we wanted to have. And because I think they were already thinking Venom stuff, I don't think we were allowed to have any Venom stuff at all at that stage. And so, these were classic Spidey bad guys I was asking for, and they weren't on the docket. They weren't on the list for Sony to be as, it was going to be Green Goblin, and then the second movie was going to be kind of like a follow-on of the Green Goblin stuff, and maybe the introduction of Lizard, right? So I think we had some of that limitation on Lizard of what we could show, or but yeah, there wasn't. Yeah, like we were able to have Wolverine in Ultimate Spider-Man, so like we could have an X-Men character in this other Spider-Man game, and it just all had to do with licensing, and we were allowed to. I guess we asked permission. We wanted those characters in our in the game, and that just came from a place of me collecting Spider-Man comic books and kind of going, okay, what's his big list of bad guys? I think we couldn't use Dr. Octopus. Because of, I think that was, Spider-Man 2 was already sort of planned. So there might have been something there where we couldn't use Doc Ock. But yeah, I mean, we put that list of characters in. Someone like Craven or the Vulture back then. It was just like, oh, sure, these are just, standard Spidey bad guys, not planned for the movie right now. You can go ahead and use those. And so we did. Yeah, it was just that part of it was Marvel licensing, and that's how we were able to use it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And then I'm deeply curious about the Spider-Man 3 that never got to be. So you had, was it 2 weeks working on it before you were told, oh, it's a movie game now?
I don't remember. It was 2 weeks, a couple of weeks, might have been a month or something like that. I mean, we started off where we were just going to be doing a sequel. I don't know that the release date had been announced at that point of it being a 6-month thing. That I think that really came about because of the movie tie-in. And so we were just, we were going to be doing the Spider-Man game. And our thought was, we'll do this first one with a Neversoft engine. We'll give it a new coat of paint, and then we'll get our Treyarch engine able to do a Spider-Man game. And so the one following on, we'll leave the Neversoft engine behind, and we'll switch Spidey on to our engine and go forward, which is actually what did eventually happen.
Yeah. I'm curious, did you have any of the story written out, or was it just, or I guess how long in development did the game get to?
Yeah, I mean, it like I said, it became the movie game pretty quickly on, because if you're dealing with a 6-month release, if you take 1 month away, now you're only dealing with 5 more months before it's going to be on the stands out there for people to buy, right? That's a very short turnaround. And so again, within a couple of weeks, I think maybe even the first week or so, we had kind of a rough framework of a game story in mind of kind of all the bad guys are coming into New York City to take out Spider-Man, and maybe there's one big mastermind behind the whole thing, was kind of like the crux of what our story was going to be, and just trying to have classic Spidey bad guys that were all kind of working together. And so you'd have these different chapters, these different levels where they would be sort of themed out to go against that. And we were able to have Craven, we were able to have Scorpion and Vulture, and we did our best to kind of marry them together into the game. Like, we had this origin movie story happening, and we had all of these other Spidey bad guys that we wanted to have, and almost an assumption of like, oh yeah, we don't want to retell the origin, but here we are. I don't think in Spidey 3 we wouldn't have taken the time. We would have, like, the origin would have been a little quick cutscene at the beginning, and then we would have just dove into the game. But because the movie was so like, well, this is a first sort of relaunch of Spidey, it's going to be focused on his origin story. So it was just trying to work that stuff in, have the wrestler have the wrestling suit, have that his evolution of Spidey becoming the Spider-Man that we all know and love, trying to have that be in the game. But yeah, we had that initial idea of all these bad guys coming into the city to take out Spider-Man early on. Like I said, within the first week, 10 days, something like that. And then we found out what it was really going to be. And it was like, well, we've done this work, and we only have a certain amount of the Spidey movie stuff to deal with, and we have this 6-month deadline. So it was kind of just push those things together and see how we could kind of lock it up and make a good game out of it, using classic Spider-Man stuff to kind of fill out the game levels and give you more than this origin story of Green Goblin and Spider-Man.
Yeah, awesome. Did you have any I guess working title names for the third game that you can recall? No.
I don't think it was even named at that point, other than it was going to be the new Spider-Man game. That probably would have happened towards the end of the product or middle. Marketing would have got involved and said, okay, it's going to be called the whatever. I don't know. But at that point, it became the movie game. Like I said, just a couple of weeks in, and everything sort of shifted.
Yeah. No, cool. And then with the 2002 game, do you remember anything as being ridiculously difficult and challenging, whether it be due to the technical limitations of using a new engine or other reasons or anything like that?
I'm trying to remember the specifics. I mean, making video games has always been about working within the limitations and trying to get the most out of it. Like I said, the very first game I ever worked on was shipped on 7 floppy disks. I said that to a dentist the other day when I was getting my teeth cleaned, and she was like, floppy disks.
Oh,
floppy disks?
no.
Oh, I wasn't quite sure what a floppy disk was. And I felt so old in that moment. But, and games back then had a resolution of 320 by 200, which is just a tiny, like that was the full screen PC graphics, So dealing with limitations has just always been like a part of making games. Trying to remember things like having a tail on Scorpion was probably a difficult thing to try to do because of the skeleton system we had access to at that point. And just creating graphics for a PlayStation 2, or an original Xbox, like just, using target files and having these, finally working in true color as opposed to, VGA. So yeah, I'm sorry I don't have like a specific story. I mean, there's just a lot of it is just challenges of like, here's this 600 polygon count for all of the, each character is only going to have that. So how do we make each character look good in that kind of economy of polygons? Trying to make sure that the texture mapping looks good and isn't all stretched out all over the place, all these kinds of things. But that's just regular game stuff. It wasn't anything specific to pulling off Spider-Man, especially since, again, the short time frame, having the engine, we couldn't fix things like webs going off the top of the screen in that kind of time frame.
Yeah, so just a bit more, I guess, technical stuff. So whenever, I guess, technical stuff relative to making games in that time, that era. So what would be the difference between making games now and making games then regarding the software? Like even things like the 3D modeling software or even the UV mapping. I guess this may not even be an interesting question, but I was just curious of what it was.
Yeah, so at the time back then, we would build, pretty much everything was done. We were a 3D Studio Max house, so we would use 3D Studio was our 3D platform that we would build things on and export out of. At this point, I don't think we were even using Maya for very much, if anything, at that point. So it was all just 3D Studio Max, and that we would export out of. And then it would be probably Photoshop, whatever it was back then. This is before the creative suite of tools. It was more like Photoshop 3 kind of thing. So it was really just Photoshop and 3D Studio Max for the most part. And then we had tools to export out the textures. We'd export out whatever the file format was for the game. I don't recall now what the exported file format was, but we would export out the characters and the levels and then run it inside the engine. So there wasn't any kind of Unreal engine at that point, or not one that was widely available for everyone to be using or whatever. So it was just running the Neversoft engine, trying to and export out of 3D Studio Max. And so as it relates to what would be different today, the economy of polygons and color space for the textures is just like night and day. Treyarch's very first video game that they did was called Die by the Sword. And the main character in that game, we did that game in a software called Lightwave. And the main character had 333 polygons, I remember. 333 polygons for a whole character. Spidey, I think, for Spider-Man 1, I could be wrong about this. I think we were in the neighborhood of 600 to 700, maybe 1,000 polygons for a character. That's nothing by today's standards as far as
millions
polygons.
now.
Right, yeah. So, and so everything, would it be easier? You have tools that you can make something more photographically real at your disposal. But now with that, with that higher fidelity, things take longer too. You have, PBR textures, and you have a full spectrum of stuff that you can do in the materials with normal maps and all of that. So characters, a much more elaborate skeletal rig and mesh deformations that allow for blend shapes for things like shoulders and things like that, using combinations of blend shapes for the faces so the mesh can move around independently of bones, so that the jaw opening and closing when someone's talking might be done with a skeleton. There's the level of stuff is so much higher now, but it also takes that much more time because of that fidelity. Is it easier to achieve something that looks more realistic? Yes, but along with it, it's harder. It's more layers, more stuff to keep control of, to manage, more work in some ways. It wasn't, back then it wasn't necessarily easier because it was less. The art form was more about what you could do with the limitations and how awesome your stuff could look, given these limitations that everyone was having to deal with in game development.
Yeah. I guess what would, right, so because there was no I suppose studios nowadays still use custom in-house built engines, what would have been I don't know if I'm going to word this correctly, but the strict limitations of working within the engines? So obviously you would have had poly count that would be viewable on screen. Maybe LODs existed at a really basic level back then.
They did, for sure.
They did. And then you've got text trim sheets for textures to keep the, I don't know what the term is, but the numbers lower. What resolutions and stuff were textures? I guess any of those questions.
I'm just trying to remember. Back then, we didn't have to necessarily. Our exporter would pack the texture pages for us, and so we could have a folder of individual textures. And then during the sort of packing stage, when it would get transferred into the game engine, it would kind of pack up those textures and take it along with it. The textures would have been target files, true color target files. Actually, I take that back. So, the way this all of our textures would have been developed at that time. It would have been layered PSDs, and the PSD file would have been like your master file. And so it has all of the layer information in it. And then we would export, during export, we would export a target file. Target files are really dead simple. They're just like an index with just a header at the top. And so then we would, export that stuff. And then as far as the geometry stuff goes, just, again, you're dealing with like a 600 to 1000 polygon character. It's got UVs on it just like you would today, but they're just more elaborate because way more polys.
That's cool. Yeah.
So we wouldn't have to pack out the texture sheets. I mean, it was just we would try to maintain a consistent UV size or scale throughout, so that you didn't have like crazy distorted, like really high resolution pixels over here and really stretched low fuzzy pixels over here. You try to keep a certain balance so that things would look kind of even across the screen, but you are doing all kinds of tricks to sort of cheat and give his face a little bit more, and taking it away from the corner down over here a little bit, just so that in the end the final presentation is the best it can be based on the limitations.
Were normal maps a thing back then? Because I know as like during the cutscenes, or like the cinematics in the game, like I noticed that obviously it's like the super high resolution character where you can see like the hexagons in the suits, and it does look like the webbing is raised. I don't know if it's in like in every shot and every scene, but it does look raised. So I was just curious if that was like modeled or if that was normal. But you said it
I don't think
then.
at that stage they were normals. I think they were bump map, and I think it was just a higher res texture and model. So our cutscene team, we had a team of artists that were focused on just doing the cutscenes, and they would have cutscene characters, and so for every character that was going to be in the cutscene, there would be sort of a cutscene level of them, like an LOD, the highest level version of them for the cutscenes, and because they were pre-rendered, we were basically playing a movie. The intro movie for that game was created by Blur, so that wasn't my in-house art team. That was created by Blur. They did effects and video game like movies and stuff at that time in Santa Monica. And because, again, of that shortened time frame that we had, we worked with Tim Miller and the guys over at Blur to generate the intro. And so they remodeled their own Spider-Man off of our stuff and did like a third one to bring it into their whole pipeline and generate their stuff. So it's kind of three different things going on. You've got the opening movie sequence, title sequence from Blur with its own high-res stuff, and it's doing everything as if it was a Pixar movie, like fully trying to render it out, everything. And then we had our team, a very small team of like 3 people, maybe, trying to create our cutscenes based on the highest LOD of our characters, and then also doing like pre-rendered stuff for that, and they would render that stuff out. And then we had the in-game characters, and so sometimes the little, we could move the camera around and have an in-game action happen and do some storytelling in there, but now you're dealing with the LOD of what's in-game. And so you kind of have all 3 of those things kind of playing out, like when you're watching the game. It's transitional game development time in our game history, right? And so as things roll forward, having pre-rendered cutscenes almost for a while there became kind of not a cool thing. Like the cool thing was to like look at how awesome our in-game graphics look. They don't have to be pre-rendered anymore. Kind of was this transition that sort of like started to happen at that time. And so, that's where that kind of evolved eventually.
Yeah.
With,
awesome.
That transition.
I think that's all the questions I've gone through. I think that pretty much covers everything.
For a 20-minute chat, it turned into almost 2 hours.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you taking
hopefully there's a bit there that you can get and cut down or whatever.
Yeah, no, I
Put it
really
together
appreciate
in a
you
way.
taking the time to do it. No, it's greatly appreciated.
Sure.
Yeah, no, anything, if you want, just to kind of wrap up, if there's anything you want to promote or you're working on that you want to draw like attention to or advertise your socials or anything like that, or
Yeah. So again, I mean, I've been more of an artist as far as a creative. When you're talking about creative directors, I think nowadays they're more of, as they should be, kind of more of the game lead. And I was at a place where it was more of like the studio art director, kind of shifting over into that role. But yeah, it was just as far as what I'm doing nowadays. You can find my stuff on chrissoares.com, so it's just all run together. I with all of the AI stuff that's happening with
yes.
artists, that's been something of a challenge to deal with and to sort of stay positive. I think some of the with the onslaught of AI stuff has made me want to go and paint on a canvas and not do things digitally so much anymore, which is kind of where I'm shifting to. I pulled all of my stuff down off of ArtStation because of their scraping that they were doing for AI, and so that's why. And just last week, I pulled everything off of Instagram because of Meta's policy for AI.
Oh, they're doing it too.
So
now.
artists are having to struggle and deal with this stuff. I want to share. I've got a backlog now of some new illustrations I've done, and I've just started glazing them to see if I want to start releasing them back out on the internet. But yeah, it's an interesting time with things changing and the AI hype fire hose hitting on all fronts.
Yeah.
So I've decided just to pull things back right now. I have chrissoares.com. It's just one, my name run together. And there's my portfolio and kind of an archive of my stuff while I worked in games, and the new illustration stuff I'm shifting to. The nice thing about that is I can control it, and I'm not at the mercy of some social media site and some billionaire deciding they're going to come in. That's what I'm doing. I'm just doing illustrations and painting and seeing what's next for me.
No, that's awesome.
It's been a pretty wild ride. I mean, my very first thing I ever did working in video games was the little icons on the map on F-117A Strike Eagle. And it was just the map icons at the end for you parachuted out here or you refilled here. And I did those in D-Paint, back in the day in VGA, where it was like, just moving. It was almost like bathroom tiles. I mean, these pixels were so big and just popping like colors in there to go all the way up to like normal maps now and like a full-on PBR texture, texturing flow and elaborate 3D characters. It's just been a very interesting ride over the 30 plus years of making games, of watching all that, being a part of it, evolving and seeing it grow and change. And it's been really fun. Looking forward to my next chapter.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, no, the AI thing is a bit, I don't know. No, it's like, because like when I was looking to go into like the gaming type thing, but obviously the AI thing has it's definitely made it difficult for like entry level and juniors and stuff, unless the opportunity and stuff. But I don't know. It's kind of like it makes me think, just because like I played Red Redemption like last year, it just makes me think of the transition between the horse and now the cars coming on the scene. It's like the horse has to get ready for the. But anyway. But no, thank you very much for taking the time to do it, because it'd be a substantial amount of your day. I would like at a later point. I would love to talk to you about the time on the Ultimate Spider-Man. Like it'll be at some point way in the future. But if you would be up to it at some point, that would be absolutely awesome. But
I have been very fortunate in that I got to work on 2 Spider-Man games. I'm pretty thrilled that that's a part of my career history, and I'm really excited to talk to you today about the second best Spider-Man game I ever worked on.
awesome.
Looking forward to talking to you about Ultimate Spider-Man, because for me that was us really trying to mimic a comic book, and I'm super proud of that. It's probably probably the title I'm most proud of in my whole career. Second only to Spider-Man the movie game. So yeah, this is a great one to work on, and working on any of those Spider-Man titles is a blast. Really, and it was great to talk to you about it. I'm always thrilled to talk with people who have played the game and had some time. And if there's any meeting people, getting to meet people in person who loved a game that you worked on, like found those little moments, whatever they were playing, like it's just very gratifying. Like just to, you put that kind of time and those hours and that effort into trying to have that fun experience, and then to find out someone, like, it goes full circle and you meet someone in real life, and it's just, and they got it, like they love that thing, they carry it around with them now, like it's one of their cherished memories of a fun thing they did when they played the game. And that's the big success, right? Like that's why, at least for me, when I'm doing it, like that's what I really love, is that you want to create some really fun experiences that people can just really hold on to and enjoy and take with them. And here's this big Spider-Man fan, and I got this chance to kind of direct a Spider-Man game. Like, wow, like amazing. Never lost on me. That was never lost on me at all, as far as like the greatness of getting to do that. And
because the game was awesome, especially for the time. Obviously now the Spider-Man 2 was like the pinnacle, sure. But for the time it was like I think during that era Spider-Man was very lucky to have such a phenomenal run. It went from the cartoon, which was great, went to the Neversoft PS1 games, which were excellent. We got the Toby films, which were quality, and then we got these games in addition to that. And then whenever I was growing up through that, like I remember getting the game, or getting the 2002 game, and I remember whenever I got to play as the Green Goblin, it was just like absolutely crazy, to the point where whenever the second game came out, obviously back then everything's just word of mouth and people make things up and you take it as gospel. But it was like, if you 100% the second game, you get to play as Otto because you got to play as Goblin in the first one. Just like silly stuff like that. But no, I remember whenever I got to play as Goblin for the first time, I was just like flying about on the glider. I was like, this is mad.
Awesome. Well, I mean, that's what we were going for. So it's really great to hear that it had that kind of impact on you. And that's why we were doing it. So awesome.
No, that's great. But yeah, no, thank you very much for your time. I'll not take up any more of your morning. Was it 11 a.m. now for you? Yeah, thereabouts. Yeah. All good. Yeah, no, that's it. Thank you again for taking the time, though. And I appreciate you taking the Toby's Spider-Man stuff in the background because it looks awesome. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right, man. No worries. All right, see ya. All right. Bye. Take care. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, and support the channel on Patreon and Ko-fi. And if you didn't enjoy the video, like, comment, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon and Ko-fi. Right, good luck.